joining us today. We're going to be chatting about creative briefs in just a second. We're at the top of the hour, but I'm still seeing some people trickling in. So just going to give it another minute before we get started. Okay. All right, let's get started and chat about creative briefs today. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm recognizing a few names that are trickling in that have been attending a few of our webinars recently. My name is Sophia Wilson here at Function Point, and looking forward to chatting with you today about creative briefs, as well, and just like how to use them within your system so that you can be as effective as possible with your clients. This is a topic that we've never really brought to our webinar series before, so really excited today to chit chat with some of you guys about this. So again, my name is Sophia Wilson. I'm the manager of customer experience here at Function Point, and I am joined by my lovely colleague, Jimmy Wu, director of sales and marketing. Jimmy, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, right before we jumped on here, Jimmy made me put in my headphones, everyone. So I hope everyone can hear us loud and clear. Please let me know if you can't. Anyone that's been attending the webinars, obviously you are used to both of our voices. We've been hosting this most recent series, so excited again to talk about the new topic with you. So our agenda today, we've got a few items that we want to talk about. First of all, starting with when you should use a brief. Obviously, this is a really big question that comes up quite a bit on, when and where and how also to make a good brief. So we're going to be talking about both of those topics today, as well as internal versus external briefs. There are definitely times where you are using briefs more internally. It's for your data. Doesn't necessarily need to be shared with your client versus times where, you do actually need to share it with a client, or you almost need the client to fill it out themselves so that you can get all of the information that you need. So we're going to talk briefly about that. And then actually something really exciting for us today is we do have an example from one of our customers as well. We have a customer that we have been working really close with recently, and they gave us permission to share a couple of examples of their briefs. So as we go through this, Jimmy's actually going to jump in and talk towards those examples in a little bit more detail for us today too. So pretty excited about that to be able to share. So let's dive into when to use a brief. So there are a few important times when you would be using briefs, especially within Function Point. The first of all would be a client intake brief. So something like this would actually be your opportunity when, say, you are signing a new client, bringing them into your partnership, into your family, and you want to make sure that you are collecting as much data on that client as possible to ensure that you understand who they are, who their brand is, maybe who their voice is. And that would be data that you would actually store maybe at the client level for any kind of like referencing back at different points, so that you, again, can keep that consistency in regards to any of your work that you would do for them. Another one would be a pre-work request brief. So this is more actually deliverable based. It's a way to collect important information when starting work for your clients. So again, you would have that first one that would be really important, understanding that voice, understanding that brand, and that will all be incorporated into this next level where, you know, they're answering questions in regards to what they need for this piece of work, and you can continue to reference back to that first piece, as well as also hold them accountable to continuing to, again, keep that voice, that brand, and making sure that they are continuing to be who they are and sticking with what they want to represent in the market that they're in. The third one, which also very important, just a standard kind of creative brief, something like this, again, could be used at any point when necessary. You know, you could maybe needing to be pivoting in regards to a job, or just needing to collect more data in general. Again, it's important just to remember that a brief is a document with preset questions. So all of these questions are really geared to at what point in the life cycle you're at with your client. So one of these creative briefs really could be used at any point. And then, of course, a post-work brief. So I know that even for ourselves, we'll have retros just for like maybe lessons learned in regards to a piece of work. And something like this is a great way of being able to document that. So, you know, after you have completed a piece of work or deliverable for one of your clients, you know, doing that review, understanding, you know, if anything went wrong or if anything went really right, or just anything that maybe is new about the client that you hadn't really realized before, that you're going to want to make sure you take into account for any future work that you do with them. Now, before I move on, Jimmy, I just want to check in any initial questions on this, or, you know, I know you also sometimes speak to clients in a different way. Anything that you'd want to add to any of these sort of like top tier definitions?
Yeah, so I just want to do a quick housekeeping to remind everyone then that in your GoToWebinar control panel, there is a questions tab. So feel free to type in any questions and I'll do my best to answer them along the ways. In regards to the brief, though, to elaborate, one of the cool things that we do internally at Function Point is when a new customer joins Function Point, there's a lot of different requirements, very similar to any marketing jobs. And we on the sales and sales team actually are forced to make sure we fill out a handoff form, which is essentially a brief, an implementation brief, so that our customer success team will have all of the information, and that you know, your sales team did a good job setting the right expectation with the customer. So that's your very first indicator.
And you love that I make you fill out that form, don't you?
I just love it. Yeah, she never starts the work until I fill that out. So I'm telling you, you know, your sales team can push back, but you can force them. I've been forced.
Yeah. You know, something else we also do, you know, if say a customer does decide to leave Function Point, which obviously we're never huge for, but we do also have a form that is filled out during that cancellation process as well, that again is that lessons learned for us, so that we can continue to build and improve the software as well as the experience here at Function Point. Yeah, we definitely use these throughout the entire our processes as well. So thank you, Jimmy, for bringing that up too. Okay, great. So the next thing to talk about is how to make a good brief. Now, let's actually talk about the goal in this. The goal of a good brief is really to limit the number of revisions needed while you're creating this brief. If you are working with a client and you're having to go back and forth, say more than 2 or 3 times, that's irritating. Like, it's just not enjoyable. It's exactly like when it comes to working with maybe our support team and you now have 3 or 4 emails back and forth over a simple technical question that probably could have been answered, or workflow question with one of our success team members. What our goal is always to limit that number and get you your answers and resolutions as quickly as possible. And that is the exact same thing you want to think of when you're creating your briefs. It's like, okay, so what details do we actually need to think about to be successful in this brief? what do we need to make sure that this piece of work or this understanding of this client is completely covered, so that we're not needing to repeat questions at any point, or thinking of something else later. So really important items, of course, to think of right off the bat, of course, is teams. Who do we need to be in contact with? Who would be the top contacts for us? Um, who will we be working with? Of course, important dates that your client may have. When would this start? Of course, when does this need to be due by? And important milestones that need to maybe be hit throughout that deliverable as well, to make sure that things are kept on track and that you can achieve that last one. So important dates to not only hold yourselves accountable, but potentially your client as well. And of course, as many details as you can get. Give them space within their briefs to actually type out all of their thoughts. Give them that paragraph form so that they can give it all to you. And even if you need to be like on the phone with them so that you can elaborate, allow them that as well. Within Function Point, we do have an inline help text as well with our brief templates, which I will be jumping in and showing you all in a little bit. But that is also a really great opportunity for you to give them a little more direction towards what you're really looking for while you're asking for some of these details, so that they can make sure that they give you the right information as well. Because, wording or terminology may make sense to you sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily always make sense to them, because that's not what their internal conversation looks like. So just giving them as much information, remembering what the goal is, which is to limit the number of revisions, and again, just some of those important deliverable times and teams and contacts that are maybe needed. Okay, Jimmy, anything that you would add to continue thinking about when it comes to good briefs? Or any questions at all so far?
No questions thus far.
Okay, great, awesome. So then let's talk about the internal versus external versions of briefs. So again, we talked about some of those main items at the start. That first one being that client intake brief. That would be something that would potentially be more of an internal brief for yourself. This is, again, where you're collecting those details on those clients, and what needs to actually be stored more at like that high level. Again, speaking towards what their brand is, what's their mission, their vision, any kind of voice items that they like to project towards their industry and their clientele. And that might even be something that you're helping them build, but it could be more of an investigative conversation with them at that point, so that you can get to know them better, so that you can also help them in building that voice as well. So again, what details, what information do you need to know? It could even be, for myself, I always keep notes on some people around, important dates coming up for them. Maybe their daughter's getting married or something like that. And just keeping track of fun little things like that also help you keep a good relationship with your client. Because as much as I wish we could keep everything in our heads, we can't. So it's really good to document this, so that it's not only helpful for yourself, but also for other team members as well. And then, of course, external briefs. This could be something that would be more client-facing, deliverable specific. It could be something that you would actually attach in an email and send to a client, actually outlining to them that until you have some of these details, you won't be able to provide them with a quote or begin work for them, because you need to know these so that, it can be a successful job for them. It is also something that could be used through a portal. So I don't know if anyone here in the webinar uses our Function Point portal, but through that, you do have the ability of connecting your briefs so that a client can actually fill out a brief as a way of requesting work from you, so that it also cuts out that initial email as well. They would be able to log in, grab the brief, fill out all the information needed, and send it off to you and create an alert in your Function Point, so that you can then review and either approve or reject that piece of work, depending on your availability, or as well as if maybe they've provided enough information or not for yourself. Great. So now after this is where we want to jump into some of our examples that we have. So I'm actually going to pass it over to Jimmy, who has been working most closely with our client, Red Rocket Creative Strategies, who's actually based here in Vancouver, British Columbia, with us. I've had the pleasure of visiting their office in the past, so really excited to be having a little bit of this partnership. But Jimmy, maybe I'll let you take it away and sort of speak towards these couple of briefs that they shared with us.
All right, great, awesome. Thanks, Sophia. Um, so so one thing to keep in mind is the type of briefs you create, you would want to have, depending on the type of work you're going to be doing, whether it's infographic or a blog or maybe a more complex website rebranding, your brief should look different for each type of work. And the reason is just because your audience is going to be different. Your goals are going to be different. The angle or the story you want to tell to the customers are going to be different for every single type of briefs, and the type of information you're going to need and your team is going to need in order to create that content is also going to vary as well. So one example we have here from Red Rocket is an infographic. So with infographic, it's all about the visuals, it's all about the numbers, it's all about making sure you have the right statistics to present. So then in this case, in this infographic brief, we have, the Red Rocket makes sure that first off, what is the topic going to be about? And they also clarify in bullet points, really sweet and simple about who the target audience is going to be, and what are they trying to achieve? Are they arguing for or against? What issues are they trying to address for their customer? And what type of stand are they going to? So, and then they even give examples. So that is actually really helpful. Sometimes your customers are not going to know what you're trying to get at. They're not marketing gurus. They hired you for a reason. So giving them an example is going to be really key to ensure that you can quickly align that. Another one is talking about the angle here. So the angle is sort of like some people name it the angle, the story. This is great not just for your customers, but for your internal team as well. So always making sure to add an angle or story because people engage in a story much more. You don't want to just talk about how to support it. So putting a story will make that messaging and content much more powerful. And make your clients think. So I really like the fact that this brief is trying to engage the customer, having the customer talk about, hey, what are some of your own ideas? I know so that you get a good feel of where the topic is, and keep in mind this might not be something you make the customer fill out on their own time. This might be something you go through during a briefing meeting, or discovery meeting with the customer, and you would start filling that in at the same time with them. It also acts as a good reminder so that during those meetings, you're asking all the right questions. And with this infographic, just keep scrolling down more, then it starts talking about the supporting points. And then even in page 2 here, we even have the table which elaborates each of these supporting points as well. Very suitable for an infographic. At the very bottom of this brief, there's even a lot of examples. So a picture paints 1,000 words. I love the fact that there's a lot of different examples here. Even if we click into maybe the first couple here, it will help give your customers a lot of ideas of, hey, I like this fuel cell backup power example here. I really like the way it's broken down and segmented into kind of 4 different rows. Whereas if we go to another example, and the second one, it will show a lot of different, it will show a different way of displaying the rows instead, or how you can just gives the customer a lot of visual ideas to banter off of. Okay, so that way you're not thinking, that way this will minimize the revisions needed because they will now get an idea and prefer one over the other. Okay. So really like this sample brief. So so hope that gives people an idea keep in mind, my suggestion is every single type of brief you have should have a different set of questions. So we will send out a few examples at the end in our follow-up email webinars. So you guys can take a look and refer to that as well. But Sophia, I think you have another example here, don't you?
Yeah, so this one, again, is used by Red Rocket directly out of the function point system. So this is a creative brief. Again, speaking towards exactly what Jimmy has said, you want to make sure that all your questions are different in regards to each of the different pieces that you're trying to accomplish and information gather from your clients. So anyone, again, that uses briefs already in function point, you're going to notice that this branding and formatting is just a little bit different than that previous one. This is one that's actually directly in function point. So what I've done is gone through and actually created this in FP so that I can show you guys how this can actually be used directly in your system. But again, you're going to see that there's lots of high level, like give me that project overview, and then let's discuss the details within here. Similar to what Jimmy said, a lot of these items would probably be talked about in, say, a status meeting where you're actually bantering back and forth with your client to gather this information. But again, you're going to always have those items like that date, who's your target audience, providing links and examples to any additional maybe competitors or outside resources that you're also using. So let's dive into the system now. Again, Jimmy, before I do, any questions coming from your end that you think would be good to tackle on screen?
Yeah, I think there were a couple questions around briefs and how you would attach that to, say, estimates or such. So maybe talking, once we go through the creation, talking about that would be helpful too.
Definitely happy to do that. So a brief can really be attached at multiple different stages within the system. Again, as we were talking about those different types, you may have that client intake form. You would want that attached at a client level, or if it's deliverable based, you'd want that attached at the estimate or job piece. Now, in regards to actual workflows within Function Point, you can actually start with a brief, fill in all that information, and then even create your estimate and job from that brief. Or in the alternative, begin by creating the estimate and then attaching a brief to that later. So depending on what your workflow is, you know, the success team is always happy to chat with you guys on what may be the best option for you. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to the success team at success@functionpoint.com so that we can help you also come up with what the best workflow would be for yourself. But just wanted to let you know that there are two options there in regards to your workflow to help with that. So to get us started, I'm just going to show you, again, very basic through our main navigation bar here in Function Point, going ahead and just adding a brief. So, you know, this could be an opportunity here. I actually have that creative brief that we were just showing previously set up already as a template here in Function Point so that we can take a look at how that's going to look directly in here for you. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a brief name. It's like webinar October 14th. Also, can we believe that it's already October? It's blowing my mind. And then you're going to have your brief types. So the brief types are the individual templates that you will create in the back end of the system. And don't worry, we're going to go into the back end so that I can show you where you are able to create those and then some of the options that are available to you in regards to formatting and just being a little bit more in control of these different templates as well. So we've got our creative brief here. We can go ahead and we can just select that. So now we know what questions are actually going to be coming our way because again, you should be making sure that each of your briefs have different sets of questions and are different enough that you're collecting the information that you need. Otherwise, you can just have a single brief if you already know that there's general questions. Then we go ahead and attach this to a company. So I'm just going to attach it to American Express in here. Again, a lot of these details can pull through to your estimate later. So the more information you can give, the more you're going to be able to have for yourself later. So, you know, anyone that's ever spoken with me in the past, I always say, the more details, the better. You're just not doing yourself any favors if you don't give it to yourself, but you know it. So why wouldn't you? Then, of course, the status of approved. If you are filling it in personally, it usually means that you know that you're going to go forward with this work. The status is more in relation to the FP portal when a client is submitting to you. before you actually turn it into an estimate, you do need to approve it. So just important to remember. And then of course, budget. This is an opportunity for you, again, to put in what the expected budget is, but of course that can always change later when you are creating the estimate. And for anyone that is attended our effective estimating, you're always wanting to put in your hours and your rates so that the system can calculate for you what something may actually cost, not only to yourself, but to your client. So this is really just what an expected budget would be. I'm going to put in 10 grand for this. And then of course the delivery date, this would all again feed into that estimate for you later. So fill in as much information as you can. Maybe we're going to just do this out to the end of March 2021. AE, Jimmy, I'm going to make you our AE. And then, of course, something else that you've noticed is that, of course, the blue lines are required fields within Function Point, but for the brief, the project and the estimate are not required. However, if at this stage you do already have an active project or estimate that you do want to attach this brief to, you can go in and choose that at this stage. However, if, again, you don't have the estimate already created, you will be able to create the estimate from it. Or if you create the project later, you can then choose to link this back. So don't worry if you don't already know what these are. I'm going to go ahead and just click save. And now this is coming into, again, all of these questions. So we have the client contacts, we have those team creative strategists, we're able to put in drop-down lists here, we're able to put in dates. For the date submitted, I did it by default to put into today if they don't already have one in there, but you can go ahead and change that. And then everything else is paragraph form. Now, instead of actually watching me go ahead and fill all of these in, I did already pre-fill it in earlier so that you're not needing to go through. I just wanted you to be able to see that as you're filling in that information and then you come to that next stage, you're able to see all of these details. So you can fill them in directly in the system. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my pre-done one. So once you click save at the end of filling everything in, this is now what this is going to look like. Again, all of that high level overview that we put in, and then that page one of details for you. So you now have all of that information available here to you in these details directly in your system, and you can refer back to this at any stage. What you also have is the option now to print it through that brief printout. And you're going to, again, notice some of this formatting from that previous one from what Red Rocket shared with us earlier. And again, all of this can be adjusted through our printing preferences in the back end of the system. So if you don't like some of these page breaks, we can take those out. Something else I had done was actually removing this upper area section of just budget. It was repeating on each page, but I was able to remove that as well for this printout. So go ahead and play around with that. It's always really a great way of just, again, making sure that our formatting and your branding also work in tandem together. Jimmy, any questions as of yet? Don't worry, I'm going to go into how you can create an estimate from this in just a second too.
All right, you're way ahead of me on that one now.
Okay.
Just want to add that for the brief, you can customize the brief questions depending on the type of brief form completely. And for instance, you can think of it like a Google form. So you can have any type of questions and also even attach files to the briefs as well, but which I'm sure, Sophia, you're going to go through on the back end.
Yes, I definitely am. Once we're done with the front end, don't worry, folks, I will jump into the back end for us as well. Great. So again, as I was speaking towards some of those workflows for you, you've maybe started, it's something very common when I'm speaking with some of my clients that I work with pretty closely is they actually, again, would start by having a sit-down meeting with their client, probably filling in something very similar to this, or again, more in line with themselves. And then what they are able to do is once they have all that information and they know they have all the details needed, they can actually come up here and action adding an estimate. So from here, it's going to take you directly to that add estimate page. And also for some of you that have used function point in the past, you're going to notice that that button looked a little bit different. It used to be an add estimate and job button right off the bat, where this is now changing it into an estimate, which is really great. So this now brings you to your add estimate page. Now that you have all the information that you know and need, you can go ahead and choose the services required, fill in what these different estimate types would be for yourself, and all of the details needed. For anyone that is maybe unfamiliar with this page, we did host a webinar just a few weeks ago on estimating and job creation best practices. So I definitely recommend going and taking a look at that and referring to that if you have any questions in relation to this, because we already know we can fill up an entire webinar and more with information on these details. But yeah, I just wanted to show you how you can also have that as your workflow. Something else, again, if you already say had a pre-made estimate, I'm just gonna go ahead and find one. What you can now do is actually add brief at this level. So there is already a brief actually in association to this estimate, but again, it could be at a point in your workflow where you're maybe needing to add more information. You'd be able to go ahead, add brief, and it will bring you again back to this detail. What you're going to notice though is that most of the details are already pre-filled out for you. It's about just choosing that brief type for yourself so that you can pull up those questions that are needed so that you can gather the data that you need. Great. Okay, I'm going to dive into the back end of the system now and talk about, again, how we can go ahead and create some of these templates within Function Point. One last sort of call for you here, Jimmy. Was there anything in relation to these workflows that you wanted to make sure we tackled before I did that?
No, I do not, actually.
Okay, great, awesome. Okay, so for those of you that have access to the back end of the system, this is where you can go ahead and create brief templates. So if you hover over admin, feature management, and you're gonna find brief types. In here, this is where all of your different brief types can be stored. Pretty frequent question that I get is there's lots back here and I don't want some of them. You can go ahead and just make them inactive so that again, you still have that record of what your previous briefs maybe looked like, but you don't actually want them to be used anymore. Especially if they actually have been used, it's better just to make them inactive so you don't negatively affect any data that you have in your system. But again, for our webinar today, I had gone ahead and created this creative brief webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and click on into this. However, if you wanted to create one from scratch, you do have that ability of just going ahead and clicking new brief type up here at the top. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do that. And we're going to give it a name. Obviously, everything needs a name. So webinar example. And then you have a couple of options for creating the brief template. You can either choose to create it from scratch or by copying another template. So if you know that you already have one that you really enjoy using, but you just need to make a few adjustments to it, maybe again, specifically for a customer or just for an adjustment, but you want to keep using both because there are some questions that you want to use in there and you don't want to have to create it all from scratch, you can definitely do that. So I'm going to go ahead and use the template of this new one. You can give it a description. You can make it available for multiple offices if you're working within specific offices. This I see pretty commonly with some of our internal marketing agencies that we work with and just wanting to kind of be a little bit more in control of which departments are submitting which briefs to the creative team. But in most cases, I recommend making everything available for everyone. Just for consistency's sake, but of course, that's completely up to you. The next big thing that I always like to point out is the briefs page 1 and page 2. So when it comes to your brief templates, there is one limitation, and that is that you can only have 2 pages worth of questions. However, you can have as many questions as you want on each page. So I haven't come across breaking one of those pages yet, but if you do, please let me know because I'm curious. But I've been told that it's pretty limitless. So please let me know. And then this is actually a really cool new feature that has just been released in regards to the delivery date restrictions. So if you want to restrict the number of days that a requester could make the earliest date for this deliverable or this request or this brief to be completed by, then you can actually put this in now. So Jimmy, I think you were definitely running the project on that one to get this pushed through. So good job, and I'm really excited to see that it has been put in there. So again, if you need to know, like if you are receiving a request from somebody and you know that you need at least 2 weeks worth of work time before anything could be completed or communication could happen, you would be able to put in those restrictions for yourself.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that that date restriction applies to, if you do have the client portal add-on, it applies to the portal requesters. So your clients who are logging into the client portal to submit the job request. So your internal team would not be limited by that restriction.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, great clarification there, Jimmy. I haven't actually seen this one in action yet, so I'm excited to see it used by one of our clients. But just quickly jumping back to the brief page 1 and 2, also used through our portal, you have the ability of making them portal facing. So something I see commonly done is that page 1 would have all of your client facing questions, and then page 2 would actually be maybe more of some of your internal questions or internal details that you know that you need to apply against that brief. So, you know, gathering all that client's items and then anything that maybe you also need to contribute. Great, so that is now saved successfully. This is when we now come into the actual briefing questions. So again, this is where we had preset a lot of these details with that project team. We're able to come in, label that question, choose that question type, provide inline help text. So as you can see, we have this client contacts here. So adding details for the webinar and who is the best contact. So as you're filling in information, you'll see that this is now starting to fill in so that as people are asking these, answering these questions, they do have that detail of that inline help. And again, this kind of leads back to one of these first infographics here, where we did have, again, what are the topics that we're wanting to really kind of push them in towards thinking about, right? So this would be where you could really utilize that to fill that in. Something else that's really important is you can make questions required. So again, if you're utilizing our portal, you can make sure that clients won't be able to skip questions without filling them in and submit them to you. Or even in the example that Jimmy gave earlier in regards to how even I have him fill in, you know, forms for me before we begin our onboarding with clients, is again forcing him to have to fill in some of those questions. So it's if there is something that you know is key and critical, make sure that you're checking this off, because then again it will highlight it in that blue way that you're used to seeing throughout the rest of function point. So I'm going to go ahead and just click add new question down here. We're going to save those changes so that you can see all of the different options coming in here now. So when you're creating that first initial question, it's going to trigger you into choosing the different types of text. And this is, again, Jimmy had mentioned it earlier, you do have the ability to either choose maybe a single line text, paragraph text, numbers, dates. You can input like website URLs. We also have different listing options. So if you know that there are checkboxes, radio buttons, or drop-down lists that you want people choosing. And then probably one that is really important is this file upload. So you do have the ability to put in a file upload field so that people can, again, submit that for you. Something important to always remember, though, about function point is that when it comes to our files, it is 50 megabytes per file, just as a single restriction there. So just being cautious. So when you do choose one of these options, you would be able to come in, and again, you'll see these details pop up here. And if you're like, oh shoot, I actually didn't want to do file upload here, you still have the ability to go ahead and change it as needed at this point. So say if we now wanted our checkboxes, we would be able to go in, you would be able to fill in those options 1, 2, 3, as well as add more into, and then even choosing a default if you need as well, if you're going to make this question required and you know that there is typically a default, but you are wanting to just also give them the other options on different checkbox items too. Okay, so that was really all of the main items I was wanting to make sure that we touched on today. Again, if anyone has questions in regards to their workflow or are getting stuck while they're actually creating some of these briefs, don't ever hesitate to reach out to the success team. We definitely want to help you so that you have the best data points in front of you as you're working with your clients. But again, before we finish up, Jimmy, any questions that are coming through from anyone on the webinar right now that we want to make sure we touch on, or anything that you'd like to elaborate on?
No, I think I was able to answer a lot of the questions that came through. Yeah, so I just want to let everyone know again that after the webinar, in our follow-up email, we will be sending the recording to everyone, as well as support articles on how you can set up your briefs inside Function Point, along with some examples, brief documentations that you can refer to as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so, Jimmy put me on a tight timeline. I'm usually someone that ends up talking longer than necessary and keeping us for a full hour, but I'm really happy that we've been able to keep it to 40 minutes today. Again, if there's any follow-up questions or you guys get stuck, don't hesitate, reach out. We want to make sure you're successful, but seriously, come in, play around with this, like see what you can create, see what works best for you. And then of course you can play around with those printouts later as well if you're ever needing to make anything actually facing for your clients in a more formatted and professional way. But yeah, I guess I'm gonna stop talking and taking up all your time today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us, Jimmy. Thank you for always being the most fabulous co-host. I always love spending time with you on these. And yeah, thank you, everyone. And we look forward to. Oh, what's up, Jimmy?
So just one quick we did have a question from Heidi. If you could just quickly show how to create the estimate from the brief. You can add that.
Oh yeah, so again, if I were to come back to this brief that we had here, and you're gonna see these actions up in the top right corner, and then there's this add estimate option, which will take you to our add estimate page. Okay, I'm not gonna go into all the detail of actually adding the estimate, but Heidi, if you have any questions on that, feel free to reach out and we're happy to help.
Yeah, and just a quick reminder that if your brief is already attached to a job or estimate, then that option would not be there for you. So that the ability to add an estimate from a brief will occur if it is not associated to any other ones yet.
Correct, yes. But again, if you already have maybe a job that is active, it will still be an option against those different items, because you can have multiple briefs against specific jobs. As well as actually at the company level. If you needed to go back to the company level, there is an action again for some of those more client specific intake forms. You can add a brief at this level rather than at a job level. So there's a few options available for you. Okay, great. Well, Jimmy, any other last minute ones you're wanting to throw in?
I'm trying to think of something witty, but I can't. No.
Oh, so sorry, Jimbo.
Just need another coffee.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in another few weeks, which will be announced soon too. So yeah, happy Wednesday, everyone.